Those that know me well know that I'm pretty apolitical. I've been asked why I don't write about more political topics on my blog, as it would probably help draw more people to my blog. The reason is simple. I use my blog as a way to get thoughts that spin in my head out in the world, and the thoughts that spin most chaotically through my head are rarely whatever the current political crisis is. At any given time, there will be a current political crisis, and it will last a week or two or three, and then it will be replaced by another. Most of my blog posts start as a stream of consciousness or are assembled from a series of short snippets written when that paragraph was relevant and then edited into a complete thought. Rarely does a current political crisis make it to this threshold. It's long since passed by the time I get around to writing it, and they don't come back around to my life often enough to accumulate enough snippets to make a blog post. I hope this much can be a point for personal reflection for some of my friends that get swept up in a panic for one current political crisis after another. And yet today, I have a unique opportunity. There are just enough snippets roundabout related to the current issue for me to edit together something for you to read. For those that are curious, yes, the first paragraph is one said snippet, fleshed out a little in the editing. That's how short many are. This last week, we held another one of the two-party presidential elections we've been doing for a little over 200 years, and that future generations will shake their heads at. Donald Trump won the presidency, and Kamala Harris lost, which entailed getting enough electoral college votes, which is tied to the way the legislature is divided up, and a bunch of other weird stuff that a bunch of people think is antiquated and a bunch of other people think is totally awesome. The weird thing is that this time he also won the national popular vote, which many statisticians considered unlikely. This controversial occurrence maps something that has been noticed for quite a while. Trump has consistently done better in elections than polls and predictions leading up to those elections suggested. Even when he lost in 2020, he still did better in the popular vote than the news predicted. Particularly this time, there were groups of people that had surprisingly high turnout in favor of Trump that were expected to go the other way. As one example among many, Hispanic voters were expected to turn out for Harris, but instead overwhelmingly supported Trump. I'm not political, and as such I'm in no position to speak to the why question. Those running the campaigns had their reasons for thinking that things would turn out differently than they did, but their reasons proved to be spurious. Whatever model they used to make their predictions turned out to be wrong. And that's exactly the point that I would like to focus on. While I can't provide a particular source, several Trump supporter-like people have told me over the years that they don't trust polls. When polls come out, they tell me that they don't feel like their community is represented in the count. Regardless of whether the current counting system with the Electoral College based on representatives and such was or is fair, it's worth noting that it was created partly as a result of exactly these concerns. That certain harder to reach, smaller communities were afraid their numbers would get drowned out. Although I have plenty of skills, conducting surveys is not one of them. I've tried a few times, and I've never had more than a half dozen answers to any survey I've conducted. For that reason, I'm not inclined to give specific advice to those that do successfully conduct surveys. That the survey takers have missed so consistently 3 surveys in a row is telling, though. Those that have expressed their concern that they aren't being counted in these surveys tend to say that one of the reasons they don't like to vote for the blue side is because they aren't getting counted. Suspected reasons come in a variety of forms, ranging from aliens and Elvis sightings to, "They just don't come out here." The fact that these surveys have been off so consistently 3 times in a row suggests to me that there's something to the theory that they aren't getting counted, though I'll admit that I don't see the straight line connection between that and Elvis sightings. Personally, I understand feeling like I want to protest vote for not getting counted, though in my case I feel counted. It's just that I'm so unique on so many issues and topics that my one doesn't substantially change the national polling. I remember the first time my opinion was actually represented in the results of a survey. My view was just less than 1%, and there were 102 people in the survey. Feeling like I'm not counted often leaves me feeling disconnected, and in my case, I have every reason to think that the surveys accurately represent where I stand. Where the surveys have missed many Trump supporters multiple elections in a row suggests that they actually are not being counted by our survey engines, and they really are a substantial portion of our population. Regardless of how you feel about them, I hope you can understand how frustrating it is not to be counted, and how that frustration will only serve to compound other frustrations related to politics. I'm sure we all understand how tempting it is to vote for the one that makes us feel heard rather than the one that seems to be purposely and repeatedly ignoring us. The obvious objection is that it's not on purpose. I tend to be skeptical of conspiracy theories and alien explanations, so I do believe that there's a certain truth to the statement. It's an accident. However, many of my friends on the blue side of the aisle have explained how they think various policies are accidentally on purpose. And where it's 3 elections and various intermediate surveys, it either fits the colloquial definition of insanity to keep doing the same thing expecting different results, or it's accidentally on purpose. Regardless of how you feel about your red neighbors, it's in your interest to make sure they feel heard. From where I sit, feeling unheard is driving them into the arms of your enemies. Unfortunately, as someone that's apolitical, that's really the end of my advice. While I also feel unheard in national surveys, it's often because I really am on the team of something so obscure that it doesn't make a mark on the national tally. Objectively, I have every reason to think that I really am subscribing to thoughts that are that obscure, because it's very difficult for me to find people that agree with me. When they have been able to find their allies, and the surveys consistently underrepresent them, that is going to lead to concerns. All of my blue friends have a core issue where they feel parts of our infrastructure ignore important people, accidentally on purpose, and that is part of what drives them to vote the way they do. It should be no surprise to them that doing the same causes the same. And to whatever extent my blue friends are actively interested in suppressing those voices even if it hurts, it seems to me that the lack of accurate information also makes political strategizing more difficult. In short, I think that if the blue side is really hoping to restore balance to the force of our political landscape, that road lies through finding a way to listen to and count those that they disagree with. Sadly, I've been watching both sides for all 45 years of my life, and of the two, it is the blue side that is least likely to actually do that. When I tell someone on the red side that my only allegiance is to the truth and that available evidence is against them, they'll deny the evidence. They'll deny the logic that shows it's against them. But at the end of the day, they'll agree that the important thing is what's true. They'll agree that if the evidence really does reflect the truth I think it reflects, then they need to change. They disagree that the truth underlying it all is reflected in the evidence I see, but we at least have that base to fall back on. On the blue side, they're far more likely to reply with, "Whose truth?" or "All truth is relative." It turns out that isn't the case. There really was an objective number of people planning to vote for Trump regardless of how anyone felt about it, and getting wrapped up in trying to decide whose truth really matters might just have helped push objectively more of them into the arms of your objective truth-seeking arms of your enemies. Personally, I can see why just that issue alone would be enough to drive a wedge between some of the groups that surprised pollsters and the blue side. I don't actually know if this is what happened, but a person only has to be actually wrong once and have the objective truth on their side railed once to get a bad taste in their mouth for the question, "Whose truth?" to leave a bad taste in your mouth. Someone that gets a speeding ticket upheld and all the officer can bring to bear is that they really felt that they were speeding, and the patience for, "Whose truth?" wears real thin real fast. The answer is, the truth. As in, for the example given, the truth that they were going slower than the speed limit. That's only true to you. stops being funny or reasonable after something like that. As someone apolitical, I think that our country is at its best when we have opposing forces competing to do the best for the country. I think there's a better way to do this than our current two-party system. But as long as we're in the two-party system, we should seek to maximize the strengths of that system. And that lies through making sure even our political enemies get heard even when we don't like it, and even when it hurts. Down the other path lies only loss and failure.